Hello, and welcome to this special edition of the Adoption and Fostering podcast. Tonight, we're speaking to Scottish adopters, foster care, and the Scottish Adoption Register. I'm doing a lot of arms in here. You can tell I'm here on my own, although Al did get involved in the interview with Jess from the Scottish Adoption Register. It's been a really interesting week for Scotland. They have a separate adoption week, different to England, and we do discuss why that is. Well, Al challenges me on why that is. So I hope you enjoy. Coming up, we've got Fiona, who's an adopter in Edinburgh, Mark, who's an adopter in Fife, and like I say, Jess from the Scottish Adoption Register. Really interesting chats with them in terms of the differences in adoption throughout the nations, really. So I hope you enjoy, and we'll be back as normal, same time next week. Take care. So tonight we're talking to two adopters, and I've got the first one here with me. So I'm going to introduce her, and her name is Fiona. Good evening, Fiona. How are you?
Hi, yes, wonderful. It's such a lovely, bright and sunny evening up in Scotland.
Is it really? At this time of night? So obviously you're going to have your telephone voice on tonight, aren't you? So everybody can understand. So introduce yourself to us. Tell us who you are and tell us a bit about your story.
I'm Fiona. I live in Edinburgh in Scotland. I'm a birth mum to a 24-year-old, and also my niece who's 24. I have an 11-year-old adopted daughter, and currently we look after two 5-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, as foster carers. So I've been a foster carer for Edinburgh City Council for nearly 13 years.
Oh, blimey. That's a busy house, isn't it?
It's very busy, yes. Yes. It's so glamorous, my lifestyle.
And you work as well, don't you?
Yes, I do work. I used to work full time, but I've now cut down to 30 hours.
Oh, so that's part time, is it?
That's part time. I'm so lazy.
So you're catching up on Al then, because he's got 6 in the house. Well, I don't think they're all in his house, but he's definitely got 6 kids. So you could be fighting for competition on that one with him. So, wow. So yes. five young people, shall we say?
Well, one young adult and his girlfriend who lives with us as well.
All right.
And also we have our other 24-year-old who is, as you just saw, and who lives in Glasgow.
Oh, okay, right. So, but still a busy house. So,
yes.
So this week is Adoption Week in Scotland, and we've dedicated this podcast special to that. And with everything, we like to kind of pick up on these things and do something with them. So we're focusing completely on Scotland tonight, and I've got some questions for you. So we're just going to dive straight in. And the first one that I really want, because I'm really interested about this, is obviously obviously being Scottish myself, I know about the geography in Scotland and what have you. And I've always wondered, is there a difference in kind of placing children in Scotland, do you think? So, would a child from the Isle of Skye, as an example, how would that work for a child?
Yeah, that's definitely a good question, Scott, because of the way it's set up, the islands can't do that. They can't place children within the islands. They really try not to do that because it's such a small community.
Yeah.
And it's not fair on the child, on the adoptive parents, and on the birth family, because it's not just birth parents, but you can have such an extended family. So it's seemed to be best that the child would be moved away.
Yeah.
So to different parts of Scotland. And sometimes children are moved across the border.
Yeah.
Because we do have the bonnier and brighter children, and so
yeah, of course.
So,
I am one. Yeah.
Sometimes they can go over. We looked after a little one once who was moved down to England to her forever family.
Right. Okay.
So yes, so it does happen, and equally as soon probably down in England, if a child has to be moved from the local authority, they would be trying to be moved into another area within Scotland.
Right. Okay. So it's really open then. I don't suppose it's kind of restricted to the local authorities as much as it is down in England, would you say?
Well, I think it is, and again, I think that's something to do with local authorities do try to place children within their own local authorities. I suppose it's better for post-adoption support if they know the child, the history. Also, legally, I mean, whilst it's the same statutory all over Scotland, local authorities will each do their own different processes of doing things. And money, because sometimes, as we know, you have to pay some money to move from one local authority to another local authority, and that can be difficult. But we have the register as well, which hopefully, the Scottish Adoption Register, which helps combat some of those issues. And so all children who are deemed to be adopted in Scotland should be on the register, and after a certain amount of time, prospective adopters should also be on the register so they can link up together. Right,
okay. Well, we're talking to Jess from the register in a little while, so it would be good to get her views on stuff like that as well, so that's really good. So in terms of, you just touched there on adoption support, I mean, obviously we have a process in England for adoption. Is the process exactly the same in terms of assessment and panels and things like that? How does the process work in Scotland?
Yes, it's the same in that, you know, the first off would be initial interest from prospective adopter. In Scotland we are different. It would be your local authority, and we have 5 voluntary agencies in Scotland.
Wow.
And so depending where you are geographically, you can get in touch with one of the 5 voluntary agencies or with your local authority. And then from that you would have your first initial visit, then you would do a prep group, and each local authority and each voluntary agency does that different. Some local authorities might do that once a week for 6 weeks, so others might do like a few weekends, so it all depends on which way they run their prep group. Then after that, there would be a home study for approximately maybe 6 months. Then after that, then they would be going on to the approval panel, and then linking, and then matching.
Right, okay. So, and what about timescales with that? Is there timescales like there is in England, or?
I think probably 6 months plus.
Right, okay.
You know, and again, it all depends on what's happening, and again, if your social worker's on holiday, if you're going on holiday, and it's all time frames, isn't it? It's I mean, but you and I both know the process has to be thorough.
Of course it does.
It has to be thorough, and you know, a lot of what people are going and talking about is they're intrusive, but it has to be done so that everyone knows that you're the safest place for that child to be, and that everything's explored. So I think the time frames, it's fine, actually. Okay. You know, I know it can be impatient if you're thinking, I want to get started now, but it's there for a reason, I think.
Yeah. And what about the fostering side of it? So is the kind of statutory stuff all the same up in Scotland, or is that different?
Yeah, well, a lot of local authorities will do their prep groups for foster care separately from adopters.
Yeah.
But some local authorities, because they don't have so many foster carers and adopters coming through, they would maybe do the similar prep group, and then they would assess them differently.
Okay.
And it's the same time from when I began, so from my initial call to become a foster carer to having a child placed with us was a year.
Really? So that's quite quick.
So it was a year, yes. So going through the whole process and and that time actually they thought they would probably have someone a bit longer, but it was just the case we didn't. Yeah. It was just waiting for a child to be placed with us. And then after that, again, as a foster carer, it's up to you. Some foster carers like to, once they move a child on, whether that's back home to parents or kinship or to adoptive family, they can have a break, or they could decide they want to have another placement quite quickly. For ourselves, we've always had at least 2-3 month break.
Right,
because we feel we need to come together as a family and just grieve for the child that's gone, and have a little time to ourselves, get ourselves ready, and then think, yeah, okay, we can go on to do this again.
Yeah.
So I'm always threatening to retire.
From what? From fostering, from work, or just general life?
From everything.
Oh, well, that's quite interesting, because I think that sometimes when you, I mean, especially on social media, and I know you don't really use social media a lot, if at all, but it's funny how you hear some of the differences in terms of England, Scotland, and Wales and Northern Ireland, because obviously we're all different. We've all got different devolved kind of governments and assemblies and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
I think what's the same is the kinds of people that are doing it, if that makes sense. We've all got something in common, and I think, as you know, like you've just said there, when you first go into the process, you want it to speed up, because you want the outcome, don't you? You want to either have a child, or you want to be that foster care or whatever. But actually, when you reflect back, and you've just said it yourself, and I think that's the perfect thing. You have a 2 or 3 month break from fostering after each placement to regroup as a family, because I think you do need that, don't you? And but I'm not sure a lot of local authorities get that with foster carers.
Well, I have to say that we've been very lucky with our link worker, and who's has always supported us on that, and feels that that's actually the most important thing to do. And us having our 11-year-old daughter, she needs a little break.
Yeah, of course she does.
She needs time, and she likes time just to be get all the attention.
Yeah.
And it becomes too much attention. The focus is too much on her, and then she decides she wants to have playmates again, because she is the youngest. So then she can have somebody to boss around. Yeah.
Well, that's what the youngest is. That's what they want, isn't it?
So So we probably go with her. We would take the lead from what she feels comfortable with, and when she talks about it, and we would talk about it as a family. Not so much our older ones, because we feel that they can get on with their own lives now, and it's our choice, and they respect that, and they support us, and they're happy to help out, and I wouldn't say they're happy, but they can be strong-armed with money.
They're probably thinking, as long as you don't adopt another one, that's
exactly what they all think.
I get that as well. So, well, it leads me on to my next question then. What, and in terms of, we know that adoption these days, we're adopting and fostering the most vulnerable children in our society, aren't we? Is there any differences in Scotland? How that, that kind of, the reasons for children being in care, is it the same? Is it, do you know that, I don't know, that there's a lot of FASD or drug abuse or domestic violence, or what's kind of your thoughts on?
I think that what you just touched upon is the same.
Right.
It's the same all across the country. I'm sure there'll be pockets of areas. The same in England as in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, where it's maybe more drug use, or where it's maybe more alcohol use. But I think across the board, it would be that. It would be neglect, trauma, and I think, again, you and I have been in this game long enough to know, as the time has gone on, the children try to get rehabilitated back home quite often. And that's when the difficulties occur, because that can go on. And it's right that birth families are given that opportunity to stay as a unit and stay as a family. But again, I think there has to be a time when it's, what about the child? What's best for this child? So no, I don't think there's any specific issues. I think it's exactly the same issues as the children all over the UK are facing.
I think I'd agree with that. So that's good that we're on the same page in terms of that. So the one thing that I hear quite often, because obviously I speak to colleagues in Scotland, is about the differences in post-adoption support.
Yes.
And I could be opening a big can of worms here for listeners in Scotland, but what's so for those that don't know, and I think most people do, what is the post-adoption support like in Scotland?
Again, it's probably the same down in England. It's a postcode lottery in some places. And it all depends, but the biggest difference that I think you alluded to was the fact that we don't have the adoption support fund.
Mm-hmm. Why not? Why don't you have it in Scotland?
Well, they don't. Well, there is that kind of one that you're not trying to stuff it back in. We don't have it because there isn't, there's not the money.
Yeah.
And a lot of places will say there isn't that money. And so it's like, for us, is how can we still manage to give adopters that support without maybe having that support fund?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's really difficult.
Yeah.
It's like, how can we do this creatively? And I think it's the same, that what comes into play then is a lot of voluntary agencies.
Mm-hmm.
Where can we find the support? What can we do? And it's agencies such as Adoption UK which really come into their own then, because they offer that support for adoptive families.
Yeah.
And it's some place to go to that's impartial, independent, and they feel that they're understood as adopters, that people get it, and that's what often is said. And I think it's a community, and that's most post-adoption support is about that. It's about finding other people who are similar to yourself, whose children that you understand, and who can be with other children. So that they're getting supported themselves. So it's great when the kids get together. That's the best part of it. They all play with each other. They've got somebody to talk to. They feel that they've got a place to belong. And I think for post-adoption support, I think what's difficult is trying to get people to come forward at the very beginning of when they're feeling that they need support, rather than waiting to there's a crisis point. But it can be really difficult because nobody wants to speak up and say, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what's going to happen. And equally, there's a lot of good post-adoption support. I mean, there's lots of local authorities who post-adoption team are trained in therapy. Yeah. And at least level 1 or level 2 DDP. And that's really important. Yeah. But I think as more and more cuts are made to authorities, then that, of course,
has a knock-on effect, doesn't it?
It's got the knock-on effect with local authorities not being able to provide all that support. And it's certainly something that we as adopters, we can do something about, and we can write to our MSPs, we can try and tell people we need this support, and we really do need it, because as you said, we are looking after the most vulnerable children in our society. Yeah.
And it's such a shame, isn't it? Because, you would think that regardless of whether we've got devolved governments and assemblies and what have you, that actually the approach would be the same in terms of how we support them. And it's not perfect, even with the Adoption Support Fund, it's not perfect. We know that. We see that every day. But the fact that you don't have it, I mean, I can't imagine had we not had access to the Adoption Support Fund for some of the things that we've needed to access, I don't know how we would have afforded that, and how different our lives would be. I think that we would have probably been in a very different position without it. So in my head, I feel that every government and every assembly should, within the British Isles, if you like, it should just follow on. They should just say, okay, well, it doesn't matter what the name of it is or how it's kind of rolled out or whatever. It's just this pot of money for these children who've been let down, through no fault of their own, and the adoptive parents and the special guardians and kinship carers are all doing such an amazing job to try and repair some of the damage that's been done to these kids, and yet there's nothing there. And I feel like I've just pulled my soapbox out from under the table now, so maybe I should shut up.
There's several things to pick up on there. One is, for us, Scottish Government has said they want Scotland to be one of the best places in the world for children to grow up. And I really truly believe that, because I think we're a wonderful country, and I think we can offer that. We are very forward looking, think of the fact that we have same-sex adoptions. We were, first to do that, the same-sex marriage. We are very forward looking. So we can do these things. And again, it's something you've just said as well. It's not always about the money, because it hasn't been a panacea, the Adoption Support Fund. No. It's more about being able to access therapeutic support services in each place. And for adoptive families to know it's there and it's tailored, and it's there if needed, and easily accessible and appropriate. And we both know that services like CAMHS are overstretched. So you can't always get access to service. So it's about when someone's in crisis, they need it there and then. They don't need it in 9 months' time when the referral's gone through. So it's about having a service to go through. And is that about money, or is that about just using the services you've got into a better way?
Yeah. And the other thing on top of this is that, you know, you've got a border between Scotland and England. It's not a physical border, it's just a border, isn't it?
Well, we'll have a wee wall as well.
Well, we do, a wee wall, yeah. And what I think is interesting, because I've spoken to colleagues in Scotland, and one lives on the border, doesn't she, just north of the border.
Yes.
And if she moved a mile south, she'd be able to access the ASF. And that's just bonkers.
Yes.
That's just absolutely bonkers.
It's absolutely crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that's...
as you say, we are from the UK, and it's like, well, we don't have any borders.
No, exactly.
So why is that? That if you can just, you know, it's like if you can just live a mile one way or another way, then you're entitled to something. Especially difficult for children who come from England up to Scotland.
Right.
You know, what are they entitled to? And whilst you also have the pupil premium down in England, we don't have that in Scotland either.
Yeah.
We have something else at the moment, but that is the pupil equity, but that's only for children who are in schools with free school meals.
Okay.
So it's really just targeting those on lower incomes. And if you're an adoptive parent, you probably won't come into that category because you've had to pass a financial assessment in order to become an adoptive parent.
Yeah.
But as you and I know, then that changes because some parents can't go back to work full time because then they've realised the children's needs are so great they have to stay at home.
Yeah.
So their incomes are slashed and they don't have the money that they used to have, and they're just getting by sometimes.
Yeah.
So it does have to be looked at, but we're always trying to say there has to be creative ways to do this.
Yes.
And we have to learn, and there's such good practice going up in Scotland, so what can we learn from this practice?
That was really interesting. I'd love to talk to you more about it, but we need to move on to this next question, because you mentioned MSPs. So obviously an MSP is explain what an MSP is.
A member of Scottish Parliament.
There you go. So not a member of Parliament like we've got MPs down in England, it's a member of the Scottish Parliament. So just in case anybody wondered.
Yes, we also have Scottish MPs down in England.
Yeah. So and obviously, like in England, we've got a number of MPs. I mean, not all of them, but some of them actually want to see improvements in adoption system and what have you. So is that the same in Scotland? Have you got MSPs who stand behind the cause?
Yes, I think so. I think it's very difficult to say, no, you wouldn't want a fairer deal for adoptive children. That's not something that anybody could say, well, why would you be against that? I also think it's what we have seen is that it's across all parties. Yeah. Which is really good, and that's great because it isn't a cross-all-party issue. This is not for one Labour, SNP, Lib Dems, Conservative. This is about all children within Scotland, so that covers all MSPs. And I think usually when we go and we speak to them, and we've just had a meeting recently with one of our MSPs, Rona Cameron, and she was very open to hear about it and to know more. Yeah. We have some MSPs that follow us, and so it's great. I think that they are very open to hear it and find out what can they do to help and support us. And we had a great debate last year within the Scottish Parliament. So we want to just keep building this momentum, to keep it alive, but what we need to do that is other adoptive parents. Yes. To be able to come and write, again, I keep saying it, to write to their MSPs, to make this known, to have it said so that people are going and saying, actually, this is an issue, it concerns me. I've done it myself. We've had someone come to the door to canvass to get me to vote for them. And I was, they couldn't get away quick enough. And it was quite funny because as I was telling them all about the lack of services for looked after children and how it was ridiculous and that's who was going to get my vote, up the path came a social worker with a child that was just going to get placed with us.
Oh God.
So that was quite amusing, and I was like, "Oh, sorry, I have to go now."
So really, I mean, I guess what you're saying is, and any adopters from Scotland who are listening, you really need to get behind the campaign side, don't you? You need to, I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, we've had an MP involvement down here with our family, and there's definitely a want from our MP to support the kind of the changes with adoption. But I think in terms of them actually standing up and going, yes, I would want to do that. I think that the geography is maybe, I don't know if it's the geography, I don't know if there's any specific reason, but when we look at communities of adopters, there's not a lot of adopters, and I'm sure that's probably the same in each of the kind of counties in Scotland.
Yes.
Where you might have pockets. But actually, if they don't all work together and use their voice effectively, then we're not going to see that change. Would you say that's right?
Yes, it's like that clap that can become a thunderclap.
Yeah.
The more of us that speak up about it and make it known.
Yeah.
And also educating the public.
Yes. Yeah.
People out there who think they think that the long lost family is what they know about adoption.
Yeah.
And that kind of sense of, it's not back from the 70s, and people acknowledge that now. So it's got to be like that. That people acknowledge that these, as you say, are the most vulnerable children. These children have experienced trauma, neglect. They've been born with maybe drug addiction, or they've been born and there was a huge amount of domestic violence, which have all impacted on their development and on how they see the world. And so therefore they need a lot more extra support.
Yeah.
And people don't really fully understand that, and I don't think people really fully understand it until they've experienced it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But education is the key.
Yeah. Well, that leads me on to this year's theme for Adoption Week Scotland, which is Talk About Adoption. So
Talk about adoption.
Yeah, so in the last few minutes that we've got, because this is going to be quite a full hour. So tell me why the theme Talk About Adoption, and what was the kind of premise behind it?
I think it's just what we said. We wanted people to be talking about it. Mm-hmm. We wanted the public to be talking about it. We wanted MSPs, adoptive parents, families to be talking about it, and for people to recognise that actually it's not what they thought it was. And to have a full-on debate about it, to bring it out in the open, for people to talk about it and say, well, actually, what does adoption mean in this 21st century? Mm-hmm. How does it impact on families? How does it impact on the adopter? And most importantly, the child.
Yeah.
And how do we get the voice of the child heard? And we're doing that at the moment, with the campaign, trying to find out the voice of the adoptive child and what adoption means to them.
Yeah.
So I think that's the important thing. So let's talk about adoption. Let's make it an open dialogue between everyone, just to see, well, what are their thoughts about it? What do they know about it? And how that can change opinions. Mm-hmm. And hopefully once people know more about it, then that will start MSPs. It can start maybe people thinking, oh, something has to change here. Mm-hmm. So more support is needed. How do we deliver that support?
Yeah.
For adoptive families to enable the child to have the best start of life within their adoptive family and support them for their future.
Yeah.
So that's why we wanted to have it. That's why we chose that topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you've drained me just thinking about it.
I know. Well, we can't do it, and we're going to have a conference on Friday, so
that'll be that's the thing. So last year I came up and I worked with you.
Swanned around.
Swanned around. Oh, how rude. And I have to say, I'm really, really, really gutted that I couldn't make it this year. But unfortunately, with the big hashtag AUK Conf and all that sort of stuff, it's been a bit busy that year as well. Even though your boss thinks I sit in a spa having my nails done every day. So, but I am so sad that I can't. Oh God, I sound like I'm accepting an award. I'm so sad I can't be with you this week, but I hope to be next year. And I mean, compared to last year, I think that your coverage is just amazing up there this year. You've got some fantastic. Yes. It's really kind of blown out the water. And I think what else is really different to the National Adoption Week in England is that this has been led by some agencies who are actually doing it from the experience side as well. So Adoption UK. Yes. And the other partners who, what is it? Sorry, the
Adoption Fostering Alliance.
Yeah.
So they know it from the professionals' perspective. They know they do a lot of training for the lawyers and medical professions and social workers, which is really important to tie it together. So as you said, together that is covering all the bases.
Exactly.
So it's actually been great to have that co-facilitation with AFA.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hopefully I'll see you before next Adoption Week Scotland.
Okay. Hopefully.
Yeah,
hopefully.
Exactly. I know, yeah, and I need to get up to see my Auntie Myra in Fife, so and she'll probably kill me for not being up for over a year, actually. But listen, thank you for talking to me, and I'll speak to you soon.
Getting you on this fangled.
Yeah, fangled technology. Well done, you.
Yes.
So I'm now talking to Mark. Hi, Mark. How are you?
Hi. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not bad, thank you. Not bad. So busy week this week. We've obviously we're kind of we're doing a special for Scottish Adoption Week, or Adoption Week Scotland. I think it's its official name. And we know each other, don't we?
We do. We go way back.
We do. Too far back, actually. Basically, I've invited Mark to come along and speak to me tonight because Mark is... he'll introduce himself in a minute, but we've got a lot in common. But the biggest thing we've got in common is we grew up in the same street, which is quite weird. Now, Mark is he's a year younger than me.
That's right.
So he's 30. But we lived in the same street, went to the same schools, and then when I left Scotland when I was 18, obviously we didn't really know each other that well, but then we became friends again on Facebook, actually, and that's how we've kind of kept in touch. But we've got a bit more of that in common, so I'll let you introduce yourself. So tell us a bit about yourself, Mark.
Thanks for inviting me on.
That's all right.
I've just gone through the adoption process myself 2 years ago, so I'm a wee bit of a late bloomer. At
the age of 30? I don't think so.
I'm actually 40 on Sunday.
Are you really?
Scary.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Terrifying.
Don't say that, because now everybody knows how old I am. Anyway,
what did you say? I was a year younger than you, did you say?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. I think everybody knows.
My husband and I adopted our first wee boy Liam 2 years ago, and we're just gone through the process of adopting our second child, but we've left this one open, so we don't know if we're having a boy or a girl this time.
Right, okay. So, how's it going with the little boy?
Brilliant, absolutely great.
Yeah.
We've had him for 18 months, and it's been a journey and a half.
Yeah.
A baptism of fire, some might say. I can try and prepare you for everything that's coming during the process, but nothing prepared us for that.
Well, that's good to hear, because that means it's actually the same message as everybody, really, isn't it? It's you go into this process. I think I don't know about you, but certainly you go into this process with a dream almost, and then you do get that dream. But it's kind of got some little bumps in the road on the way. Do you feel that's how yours would be easy described, or do you think?
I would say there was bumps in the road through the process and after, really. I think when we first started, it was a dream. We weren't entirely sure whether it was going to happen or not. We thought, nothing ventured, nothing gained. We'll give it a try.
Yeah.
And At that time it was slightly different. They've changed the process up here now. Certainly in Fife, it was a much longer process when we started. So we were about 2 years from start to finish, the application to approval.
Right.
Whereas now they're getting them through. They're aiming for sort of 6 to 12 months.
2 years.
2 years it was, yeah.
Wow.
I know, a long time.
So what do you think? I mean, you don't have to say if you don't want to, because I don't want you kind of feeling that you have to answer these questions. But what do you think the delays were in that 2 years to make it 2 years?
I'm not entirely sure if it was a delay specifically to us. I think it was just that's how long the process took.
Right.
At that time, they didn't have a specialist adoption team within social work at Fife Council. It was sort of adoption was dealt with generally amongst other things. So now they've taken out sort of a section of social workers and made this specialist adoption team to try and get adopters through much faster.
Okay, that's really interesting, actually.
Yes.
It is, because I mean, when I think back to when we adopted, and I guess I'm trying to relate this to the same-sex adoption thing rather than, you know, generic adoption. 11 years ago, we were 13 months, and everybody said how long that was. So for 2 years, that's a long time. Even
it was a long time.
You know, for 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, that would have been. So
yeah.
But things have changed. Things have improved.
Much improved since then. I think the Fife Council have been really good with us that way. They've taken a lot of the feedback that we gave on board, us and other adopters, and sort of taken that advice and created this team around the sort of consultations with the adopters at the time, which has been good for everybody, really.
Yeah, and especially for the kids as well, because, you know, there could be
absolutely
an ideal parent, you know, who can help to repair some of that kind of stuff that's happened to them in the past and what have you quicker than, you know, taking 2 years about it. That's really interesting. And so just kind of from my own interest, I guess, same-sex adoption in Scotland. One of the reasons I moved away from Scotland was because of the reaction I got to being gay.
Yep.
Now, I know enough now to know that actually things have moved on. And bearing in mind, this was 21 years ago that I moved away, so it's a long time. So how have things changed, and what does, you know, what's the reaction been to same-sex adoption and same-sex marriage and what have you in Scotland?
Overwhelmingly positive, I would say.
Right.
I mean, we've been quite surprised with the reaction that we got. We expected a few negative comments. We've had one or two.
Yeah.
But the one or two negative comments that we've had, we've never really had to say anything or do anything about it, because everybody around us has sort of jumped on it. Complete strangers have jumped in to basically just say that that's not acceptable and jump to our defence, which has been really, really nice, actually. You'll know, I don't know if you saw the threads online the other day. We did a piece for well, it was actually Fife Council that did it. We just did a short interview for the promotion of Adoption Week, and put that on with a short story and posted it on the Fife Direct website, and then there was a few sort of comments underneath it. Really nice comments, positive comments, and then one negative comment. And then comments just started rolling in after that. And I think you checked it just before we went to bed, and the comments had just went crazy, all piling on this guy who'd made a negative comment.
Really? So there is a lot of support for it then?
There's a huge amount of support. I mean, we were really well supported during the time, the 2 years during the adoption process. Every sort of new person that found out would contact us and say, "Oh, I'm really happy for you and really pleased." And everybody was sort of desperate for him to come along and meet him.
Yeah. And do you think that
It's great.
do you think it's been as quick to move in Scotland, or do you think it's actually quicker than it was in England? So bearing in mind 11 years ago when me and Tris adopted the first time round, I mean, what's your perception of that? Were you just like you say late bloomers and getting round to it? Had you, you know, what do you think?
I can't say for sure, because I mean, me and Neil, we only got married when I was 30, and I mean, we did sort of discuss having kids at that time, but it was far too early. We wanted to have some time together, have some nice holidays, have a nice house for a wee while.
Yeah, well, you know.
Before we brought kids in to destroy it. So that's out the window now. That's long gone.
Yeah.
But I think looking at the information that we've read online, I think for what other people have said, it has been a wee bit slower in Scotland than it was down south.
Right.
And I think even now that it's, I think the last sort of stats I've seen on it was a couple of years ago, and it was something like 1 in 26 adoptions in Scotland were to LGBT couples, and I think it was about double that in England.
Yeah, I think it's 1 in 12, 1 in 11 down here, yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so, round about that.
It's no something I ken too much about, it's just something I read a couple of years ago. But it's unfortunate. But again, I don't think that's anything to do with the services that are offered. I think that's to do with the perception that me and you have, that society here was a wee bit slower in catching up to supporting same-sex adoption. Whereas I think down south, people caught onto that much faster and were quite comfortable with it. Here it took a bit longer, I think. Yeah,
that's really interesting, actually, because I feel the same way, and I think about, you know, when I told my dad we were adopting, his face said it already, but it's taken him that long to get used to me being gay, and then I just laid something else on his shoulders, kind of thing. But actually, you're right. I think that, you know, when I always remember coming up to Scotland originally when we first had the older two boys placed with us, and everybody was kind of in awe of it, like it shouldn't be not that it shouldn't be happening. They weren't being that kind of negative about it or critical about it, but it was just like, oh, you know, let us know how that goes, kind of thing, you know, rather than this is fantastic. Let's jump on this. So I think I would probably I'd say that's probably about right what you've said.
I think there still is probably just a wee bit of that. I think some people do have that reaction, like it's a wee bit special somehow. Yeah. Where obviously it's just every day to me and you. Yeah. They see it as something shiny and new. Yeah. It's an odd reaction, but it's a nice one.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. So that leads me on to then support. So you know, obviously, you know, I talked about this with Fiona and the chat I've just had with her, but in terms of how you feel supported, obviously you've said that, you know, Fife Council have made a lot of changes, and they've got now a specific kind of team that deal with adoption. So in terms of, was that the same with kind of the support side of it? You know, is there support groups? What sort of stuff do you get involved in up there to be able to access
They
support?
do. They have sort of ongoing support. I mean, we're always in touch, really. They have sort of quarterly support groups. One's an adopter support group and the other one's a children's group. So they run quarterly, but there's one every 6 weeks. And whichever one, everybody takes their kids to as well. So there's that. Then there's an online Facebook forum which is just Fife specific. Right. Where all the adopters that are approved are added into this group, and we all sort of talk back and forward through that. Yeah. And then they run an annual fun day and a Christmas party, so there's always opportunities to get in touch. And then they're constantly in touch with updated training and things like that, so you're always meeting other adopters and in touch with your social worker all the time. Yeah. So I've never really had, there was sort of a big gap obviously between our adoption being approved and then us applying again. There's like an 18-month gap, but I didn't think I went any more than a couple of weeks without speaking to our social worker. Wow. we've come to be quite good friends.
Yeah. So that's quite good as well, isn't it? The fact that
they're lovely folk. They've been really brilliant. Yeah. Really brilliant.
And I don't think that would be, I mean, I'm not saying about Fife, but I think if you look at other counties and especially like some of the local authorities in England, that wouldn't be the case, where, you know, the adoption order would be granted and then that's it. You know, you're kind of not cast adrift, but you would lose that contact. So I think that's really quite important to be able to access that. Because if you do have problems, then at least you've got a way in.
Aye. And certainly with other adopters, because it's not always the social worker that's the best person to speak to. I think sometimes the best person to speak to is the other parents. Yeah. When, especially in the first year, because in the first year, obviously it was brand new to me. I mean, I've never been a parent before.
Have you not?
No, never been a parent before. always been at work, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and then all of a sudden work ended and parenthood started, and it was just as quick as that. Yeah. And in that first sort of few weeks and months, it was actually quite scary, and for a wee bit isolating. And if that support hadn't have been there, I'm not quite sure who I would have spoken to about the things that were specific to me and the other kids in our group.
Yeah. So
it's nice to speak to other parents, but other parents that are non-adopters didn't quite get the issues that you need to talk about. So when you talk about it, they kind of look at you like you're worrying too much, or they just didn't understand what you're talking about. It has to be another adopter, really.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, because I mean, you know, I bang on about peer support all the time. You've probably seen that quite a lot on Facebook as well. And part of that comes with my job. You know, I mean, that's something that we really believe in. But I think it's true, and I don't, you know, you don't, excuse me, you don't have to be a member of any one specific organisation. But if you've got other adopters who know exactly what you're going through, whether it be, you know, just about them settling in, or, you know, things like you're bound to be. Well, I know you're going through this at the minute. You're going through some problems with. Should we call it toilet training, maybe? Something I saw the other week?
You could call it that.
So, Thanks for bringing that up. Well, I did see it, and to be fair, I did read it out to Trace, and we both wet ourselves, because that is the kind of thing that you have to face. And I'm not sure that... well, I guess other parents must go through this. Go on, tell the story, but don't use the swear word. But go on, tell the story, because I think it's hilarious.
Thank you. We put Liam to bed he usually goes to bed about 8:30. So we put him to bed at 8:30. We had a wee bit of rummaging about, nothing unusual. He usually jumps out of bed, gets some teddies, takes them back in. So by 9 o'clock it had went all quiet. Popped up the stairs just to tuck him in, and got halfway upstairs. I could smell something foul. And there's a big box room cupboard at the top of London, which has Christmas presents in it. So he had gone to the toilet in his nappy, fished the toilet out of his nappy, smeared himself in it and his bed, and then there was a trail leading from his bedroom into the box room cupboard, and I found him in there raking through Christmas presents, covering them in poo.
Fabulous. Just fabulous. Just what you need.
So it was an interesting night.
Yeah,
what you didn't see on Facebook is the same thing happened again the following night.
Oh, really? Oh. But back to my point. Back to my point. I had to mute myself there because I was laughing. So back to my point about the fact that, you know, those sort of things are an issue, aren't they? I mean, some people would say, well, you know, all kids do that, but actually, do they? Do they do that night after night? You know, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've heard stories of kids who actually consistently do that every single night because of, you know, some of the background that they've come from, and you know, it's really important to be able to have an access point where you can actually talk about it freely and not feel embarrassed to do it.
But certainly, I mean, there's other things that have sort of come up over time, wee things in his behaviour. You think, is that anything to do with him being adopted, or is it just normal child behaviour? Because as a first-time parent, you don't know, and the only way you're going to find that out is if you're talking to other parents. Yeah,
that's quite key.
Hopefully that's
finished with.
Behind us, pardon the pun.
So that leads me on to then the next thing, really, about when we're talking about peer support. And is there, do you have like a support network or a peer support network of same-sex adopters, or, you know, single adopters who just so happen to be LGBTQ, or, you know, is there much of that or not?
Aye, there is. We are in touch with quite a few LGBT adopters. Couples and single, actually. We didn't have a specific group set aside for LGBT adopters. We're all in the same group. Yeah. Everybody's in the same boat, helping each other out. So, but we will be doing, hopefully, something because Fife had its first Pride actually last year.
No way.
It
Seriously?
did in Kirkcaldy. I know.
Oh my God.
Could you believe it? Could you believe it? It's in Kirkcaldy.
Oh,
so they're having another one next year, which is just weird. I know. Thinking back to 20 years ago when it just seems unbelievable, doesn't it?
It does.
We're thinking about doing something this year at Pride.
Right.
As a group, an LGBT group. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. That's
we'll
really
get enough people. We'll go along.
Yeah. That's amazing to think how much that's moved on. I feel like I'm just sitting chatting to you on the phone. So people, if you're getting bored, feel free to fast forward 20 minutes, and then there'll be someone more interested on than us. But it's just amazing to hear that kind of change over the years, And I'm guessing that if I'd lived in England and then moved to Scotland, it might have been the same kind of situations. But I think it's probably more relevant because we like we said, we grew up in the same street, went to the same schools, probably had similar reactions from friends or what have you in terms of coming out. Maybe I don't know if we did because we've never really spoken about that. But but then to go on to kind of follow the same paths as each other in terms of becoming parents. That has, I would never have imagined 21 years ago that would have been accepted, never mind possible, because I think the possible bit was made possible by the governments that we kind of live under. But in terms of social acceptance, I think it's moved on dramatically.
It's certainly something I never expected here. That's the reason why I moved away in the first place, because I didn't think I would ever be able to live the life I'm living now. In this place. So I thought the only way I would be able to do that was to get up and leave. I think it's important to say when we're telling people that we lived on the same street, it was a wee countryside village that we lived in. It wasn't a city. We were in the back of beyond, surrounded by farms. So it's the last place progress reaches.
Yes.
But finally, 20 years later,
it arrived. Well, do you know what? On that note, I think that that was a fantastic opportunity to catch up, but also to kind of let people know what it's like in Scotland. So thank you for that.
No problem. It's been my pleasure.
To continue on with our Adoption Week Scotland theme, myself and Al are together now. Hi, Al.
Hi, Scott. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very Scottished out tonight, to be fair.
Are you? Is that even a thing?
I don't think it is, but that's how I feel. Having just done 2 podcast interviews, it's been really interesting, actually. Really, really interesting. And
we have some questions about Scottish Adoption Week. Can I ask you them?
Yeah, you can, yes.
Why is it a different week to the English week?
Well, that's a good question. That's a question that I would like an answer to as well, because actually, should it not be just for the whole of the UK? I suspect it's likely to do with the funding of it, with having devolved governments and assemblies. I think that's probably the reason.
You've just gone beyond my understanding and knowledge of...
Oh, no, I haven't. You don't act so silly. And also there's different kind of statutory agreements for each of the governments and devolved governments and assemblies as well. So I would imagine...
adoption laws, I would imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a different legal system. You've got sheriffs and all kinds of exciting things up north, haven't you?
Well, they do, yes. I mean, I am Scottish, obviously, but I don't live there anymore. I haven't done for a number of years, but certainly it is very different. It is very different. So what was your next question, Al?
The next question was, and this might be a slightly risque question, if I can draw you onto the rocks of my mind.
No.
Because we didn't do a special for the English and Welsh Adoption Week. So why are we doing one for Scotland?
Well, it's an interesting thing. I think for me, when I was approached to do one for Scotland, I think it's because we do tend to be kind of England-centric in some of the stuff that we do. And even, if you think about our podcast so I think for me, it's more about kind of, if there's something going on somewhere else, then why wouldn't you? And the same in Northern Ireland. If there's something going on in Northern Ireland, we'd I'd make an attempt to try
Could we travel
to that as well. Not sure budgets would allow.
You answered that question so well about Scotland that it made me think like you'd even prepared, that it was almost a staged question. I thought, this is, we're going to be accused.
You were going to answer it. You were going to ask it, that's all.
Yeah, people think we're some sort of patsy or some sort of...
Yeah, well, But we're not alone tonight. We do have another guest.
Cool.
And we've got Jess. Hi, Jess.
Hi, how are you, Scott? How are you?
Yeah,
I'm really
we're
well,
not bad. Well, We flip from day to day as to how we feel. Today is fine. I've had wine, so I'm all right.
I've had too much coffee.
So, Jess, you've joined us tonight, and you actually work in adoption in Scotland, don't you?
I do, yeah. I work for Scotland's Adoption Register. I'm the admin coordinator for them. So basically, the Scotland's Register is very similar to the English Register, which is now called Adoption Match. We've also got the Welsh Register in Wales, surprisingly enough, and we've also got ARIS in Northern Ireland. So we're the Scottish side of it, the Scottish Register.
Fabulous. So you know more than us, really, because I didn't realise there was one in Northern Ireland and one in Wales. So that's interesting. See, you've informed us already. So in terms of the Scottish Register, is that kind of a centrally run thing? Is it, is it from one of the big cities, or is it,
we're based in Edinburgh, so I suppose it's a capital base, but it's a national service. So it was set up by the Scottish Government in 2011 to facilitate family finding just across Scotland, and it just gave opportunities for matching for a wider pool of adopters. That was the intention of it, really. Because I think previously, while it was an okay thing to do, a lot of the local authorities had kind of connections with each other. So if they were close, then they would match. Whereas the idea was to expand the pool and give children a better chance of a better match, essentially, with more adopters to choose from.
Okay. So before 2011, there was nothing like that, wasn't it?
I mean, before 2011, there were things like you'll know of. I'm sure Adoption. I should know, but I'm sure Adoption UK do this now. Basically, the newsletter where you had children's profiles sent out.
Right.
So before then, we did have things like that. We also had the North East Consortium of Scotland and the South Consortium, and they would kind of help local authorities who were in the consortium area match, but it wasn't quite the same thing. It wasn't a national database. It wasn't a national system of doing things.
Okay. Interesting.
I have some questions. Sorry, I've been thinking about this.
Surprise.
You have a register of children, and a lot of adopters. It's kind of a huge anxiety for a lot of families. They work their way really hard to get through the approval process, and they finally kind of get through this doorway into the promised land of being approved, and then for some, there's nothing, and they're kind of just waiting. But you obviously hold a register of children. How quickly do children get put onto that register from their decision being made that adoption is the plan?
It's interesting you should say that. It used to be, referring to the register used to be on a voluntary basis. But as of April 2016, it's now mandatory to refer a child within 3 months of the plan being that adoption is in the child's best interest. And for adopters, the same 3 months of them being approved at panel. So this is just a sort of continuation, I think, from the theme of setting up the register in the first place, which is to expand the pool of adopters and just to create more opportunities, I think, nationally.
So prior to that, was it an issue of, because obviously there's a financial stuff that adopters don't necessarily see going on in the background, that it costs authorities if they go out of their own authority, there's a standard fee. So there's a disincentive to use the register, but that from April 2016, have you seen an increase in people coming?
I think there has. I think because, which I'm happy to go on and talk about again, as well as there being a change in the fact that it's now managed to refer, we've actually moved to an online system now, which means that I think with those two things together, it was maybe a slower start where people were having to refer online. We're used to an internal system before. I won't get into too much of the internal, non-internal, because that's very and boring.
Scott loves all that stuff.
We have seen an increase, yeah. I mean, it's definitely on the increase, and we've seen the increase in matches every year since register began, which is really encouraging. It's very positive.
That's good. So the nature of the children that are on the register, does that tend to be what you would classify as hard to place, which is a horrible phrase, but we'll run with it because that's the one everyone uses?
I think now, because it's mandatory, you're seeing more children who are what you would describe as not as hard to place, I suppose. Much younger children, you're seeing them being referred because it's mandatory. Because we have 3 months in which, that period, the reason that we have that is so that local authorities who have children who are maybe younger, don't have as many, additional needs, aren't part of a sibling group.
Mm-hmm.
For that first 3 months, they may already have a family in their local authority meeting, and that as being a good potential match, and that's absolutely fine. That's a match, that's an adoption, that's great. So yeah, I suppose the children on the online register would be described as being slightly harder to place.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a mix.
But I guess, like you said, because of that timescale now, you're not getting children that have voluntarily been put on after a year or 2 years or 3 years where people are going desperate. Next question, Scott. Have you got any questions, Scott?
I'm just enjoying the conversation, to be perfectly frank,
honestly,
because I think that, as expected, Al, you have all the right things. I'll tell you what I did have a question about, though, Jess, was the geography of Scotland, and I guess it probably is no different to England, but you've got islands, and you've obviously got kind of a lot of rural areas in Scotland. How easy or difficult is it in terms of, I don't know. So the Isle of Skye, as an example, and it is a complete example. I'm not saying that there's a number of children looking for adoption placements in the Isle of Skye, but is it more difficult given the geography and things like islands and the ruralness of Scotland, or do you just not think of it like that?
That's something that I suppose you'd have to ask each local authority. We've had children from Shetland, for example. Actually, that's a really good example. Yeah. Shetland, just this year, we've had a couple of children matched from Shetland who've gone down and been adopted by doctors in the central belt of Scotland. So yeah, definitely, if the match is good, then there shouldn't be a restriction. I don't think most of the time there is. I think it's obviously dependent. I mean, if the child is in place that they have direct contact with their siblings, and the siblings live, in the Western Isles, and they live in the Isle of, the Hanover Island, the Western Isles, that means that it's going to be hard if you're going to move a child all the way down to Glasgow. But if it's a good match and all the parties are willing, then that's fine. I don't think it's a hindrance. I don't think it stops anyone if the plan's right, if the match is right.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask, do you enjoy your job?
I do enjoy my job. It's good. It's very rewarding, knowing that I've contributed, knowing that one of the events that I've helped put on, or one of the matches that I had a conversation with someone and it resulted 3, 4, or 5 months in some way because I've helped down the line that they've been matched. Of course, it's brilliant. It's a great experience. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you know what you were getting into when you took on the job?
I wouldn't really put it like that. I got into. I actually started off. I temped for the register, and then after that, it was someone else. Was the previous admin coordinator had paternity leave, so I just sort of for the interview, got the job, did my 3 months, and it was very different from jobs I'd had before. I mean, I'd worked for Edinburgh Council and doing temping work, but my background is in journalism. Actually, I've got a degree in journalism.
Oh, really?
I know.
Interesting.
I've learned a lot in the job, but I love working for the third sector. I really like working for the third sector. It's really good. It's rewarding.
Right, now you've had your 2 easy questions, now back to a hard one. This is how it works around here. We lull you in with a sense of, oh, what nice fluffy guys. I've been thinking a lot this week about kind of pragmatism in relation to matches, because we have like the perfect match, don't we, that we all aspire to. But that level of perfection, we then, as time goes on, you're balancing that against the impact of that time. So is that an element of your job, and is it, how does that work? That's a rubbish way of putting it, but
I think, to be honest, although we're in the register, we're aware of the fact that I don't think there should be a fairy tale dream about the perfect match. I don't
Yeah.
think it's. We facilitate kind of planning events, and we have a register available for social workers and doctors to look for children. I suppose we kind of offer as much practical support as we can. Also, we're doing, my colleague Pascaline and also my manager Robin as well, we're creating some helpful guides for sort of family finding, and that will hopefully be used in groups. I suppose it's kind of how do you get the right match? There's different ways of doing it. We do activity days, and it's our fifth one we've actually just finished doing. And obviously that's a big thing in England. They've had about, guessing numbers here, but I think it's about 70, 80 they've had, maybe more. This is only our fifth one. And I suppose the different way of the process for matching, or the process for linking is very different, and we're trying to get activity days. Because I think, originally you wouldn't even see a photo of a child, and you were expected to be matched with them, and then information you'd read about the child. But I think that's, disruptions happen again, and we've tried different ways of doing it. So I think with activity days, we're trying to sort of count our doctors in.
Yeah.
And while it's also important to look at, the logistics of any kind of potential match, there's also a lot to be said for an emotional connection that you get from meeting a child that you can't get on paper. You can't get from reading a profile. Sort of balancing that, it's about...
But they're still controversial, aren't they? I mean, I could argue myself both ways on that kind of thing. Yeah. But I'm a proper liberal, lefty social worker, so I can wrap myself in knots about literally any issue that you choose. What do you think, Scott, about those activity days?
Yeah, they're interesting because I've not been to activity days, but in England with the regionalisation process, we've obviously looked at that as part of Adopt a Voice. And what I think is interesting is the perception of them, because I think they're perceived as something that they're actually not. Mm-hmm. I think they're perceived as kind of almost like a market for going in and selecting a child. And in actual fact, they're dealt with a little bit more delicately than that.
Really?
Yeah. If I could just cut in, I totally agree with you, Scott. I think there's definitely a different perception than what the day is and what it's intended to be. And I think, I think you hear a lot of things, and there's things in the press about, they're cattle markets, they're just fairs.
Yeah.
And honestly, it can't be more than the truth, more away from the truth than that. It's obviously the time it takes to prepare. Everyone involved is incredibly important, and depending on the age and the stage of the child, it's really important to not hide the day from not have some fake reason why they're going. If they're 6, 7, 8 years old, and it's right for them, they should be told what the day's about. And we encourage social workers to do that, and we've also created information about how to do that and how to engage in explaining to them what the day is about. But yeah, definitely the most important thing is preparation for the child.
Yeah.
And essentially it's a fun day out for the child. It's in a safe environment. We work with activity providers who understand and understand the importance of fair play, and understand what the day is about. We've worked with children's theatre companies who are also sort of clown doctoring, and kind of sensory play. And so I think what we get overall is a feeling of, a lot from our evaluations, get the feeling of that people had some reservations about the day. They were concerned about, but overall afterwards their opinions had changed when they actually saw what it was about. And I assume that will be the same for English activity days as well. I'm sure that they've done. We use the model, actually. We use the English model to kind of inform how we did it in Scotland.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of adoption and matching, I always think there has to be an element of pragmatism. You could maybe sit in an ivory tower and try and look for these ideal ways of putting families together. But actually, like you say, you need sometimes children's narratives don't come across very well on paper, but actually seeing them can colour in what can be a very black and white kind of perception.
Yeah, and I think as much as the social workers, they can be, almost, I can't think of any social worker who's bad at creating profiles. They all do a great job, but there's only so much you can do a child's personality and their slight characteristics with 300, 400 words on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And it always strikes me, it still gets me, because I've been to all the events, I've sort of helped organise all the 5 events, I've been to them all, how quickly you can get a sense, and it's just, it's on, it's the sense of the personality sense, and it is so different, and it beyond, if a child has additional needs or support issues, it goes beyond that, and you're not just looking at negatives, you're seeing the child for who they are, just a child at the end of the day. So I think they're groundbreaking, controversial, but overall we've had a really good success of them here in Scotland. Yeah.
That's really good.
I think that's a good summary of it as well. They're groundbreaking, but they are quite controversial. And I'd agree with everything you said there. And I mean, I remember a couple of years ago considering not going to one, but considering what they meant and whether I agreed with them or not. But you could say the same about the exchange days. So, in England, I don't know if you do them in Scotland, but the exchange days and
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the same thing because the kids aren't there, but it is almost, you could almost kind of compare it to shopping in some ways, but actually it's not about that. It's about it's about social workers or matching coordinators to be able to actually meet parents who come in and they know they should know these children, so they should be able to say, actually, do you know what, you could be a potential parent for this child.
Yeah. We encourage foster carers as well to come to exchange days. So I think they'll be a very good understanding of how the child lives with them. They know about really. And I suppose you could say the same thing. Exchange days at one point were considered controversial. I think that changed over the years. I think when people see how successful they are. So I suppose the hope is that with the right preparation, with the right care taken, that activities will be the same as well. They'll just become part of the family finding lexicon, and people will appreciate them for what they can do. I mean, we've had, the truth of it is that our match rate from all of it, not to sort of be boring and bring numbers into it, but our match rate for the 4 events, it's a bit too early now to know what's going to happen with the 5th event, but it's 19%. So 19% of the children who came to all 4 events were matched. And that's the highest percentage we have for all families.
So Jess, what do you think? Because obviously you've referred to the kind of English matching system and the exchange days and what have you. What do you think? There's any differences in the way it's done in Scotland to the way it's done in England, or do you think it's almost, it's using some of the best and then improving it, or how do you think it works?
We'd like to say that anything we've sort of borrowed from England or have improved. But I think, you were saying at the very beginning, there's differences in the way we do things legally. The legal system for adoption is different. I think in England, it can seem a little bit convoluted in Scotland. I don't think it necessarily is. I think, matches still happen, and they definitely still happen. South of the border, Scottish children are matched with English adopters. It does work, but I think English adopters can find the Scottish legal system a bit confusing. There's a lot of more orders in Scotland. That there can be than there in England, I believe. But I think overall, I mean, we do, since we've taken on adoption activity days similar to England. The main one, I mean, we collaborate with Linkmaker, who are actually an English organisation. If you know Linkmaker at all?
Yeah.
So the Scottish Adoption Registry to create our online system. So, I mean, I suppose we've actually even taken what was a sort of tried and tested way of family finding, Linkmaker, and we've taken them on board, and they're being helpful to us, providing us an IT system that is still separate from the rest of the Linkmaker system. We still have our register, and they're providing us with a good IT service that is tried and tested and works. So we've even taken stuff from England. So yeah, quite similar, I suppose. And again, what I suppose is the children really that are available. I suppose in England, just to do with the makeup of ethnicities, we're talking about that now, but there's less less black and minority ethnic children in Scotland just because of the population. There will be, but we imagine we'll have the same percentage of sibling groups who need placed, the same percentage of older children who need placed. So I think, but in terms of that, it's pretty similar. And of course, children who need placements are all lovely, and most not had a great time at the beginning of their lives, but they're all lovely and they all,
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. They're all children and they all need, they need the basics, don't they? Love, care.
Iron brew. They need a lot of iron brew. That's what they need.
A lot of iron brew.
Maybe if they're lucky, not all the time. I might.
Oh no, that's
so.
true.
Can I ask a question? It's not particularly related, but you've got a journalism degree, so you used the word lexicon. I've looked it up. It's all okay. I googled it while. Come on, we're not the brightest of lads.
Well,
bless
let's
us.
do that now because I was wondering what that meant.
Yeah, we'll talk later.
Anyway, but I tell you what, I do have a question. It was one that I meant for Fiona earlier. Actually, was about the coverage of adoption in Scotland in terms of the media. I was just wondering, in terms of adoption, what is there a lot of coverage? Is there, is it something that's talked about on the TV, on STV, or is it something that the Daily Record report on often, or is it just something that's quite niche to certain newspapers like it is maybe in England?
I think it probably is relatively niche, unless some as a specific story. But I suppose we do run, and bring up sort of Adoption Week Scotland again. We do run campaigns, and some of them have, I imagine this time around, and have previously been in newspapers. There is a programme. It's Nikki Campbell does a programme, but that's mainly about people who were adopted, and they're 70 years old and they're tracing their birth families. That's very popular. But I think the Scottish Government and the charities and organisations that they support are doing a good job to continue getting adoption out there and to continue to get the needs that that we're looking for adopters who can take children, sibling groups and older children, and just the need that's there. I think they're doing a reasonably good job of it. And there's always improvement. We'd like people to be banging on the door, asking to adopt, but I think they're just doing a good job. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? This is slightly random. Was there any questions that you were really hoping we wouldn't ask?
No, not really. No, I suppose it's mainly just how well I've answered them. I think I've done okay.
I think you've done fabulously, Jess.
You have. You've been very brave.
Not my foot in it or anything. I mean,
no.
Yeah. I know. I do genuinely care about the work of the register. I think we do genuinely do.
No.
Yes, coming from the background as an admin coordinator, because I'm not a social worker, so it's all kind of.
Nor am I. So you're fine. Yeah. You're in good company.
Yeah, and I'm. Well,
yeah, he dabbles.
I dabble. My annual review was questioning certain elements of my.
Right. Okay.
It's an in-joke. Yeah. We talked about my annual review on a podcast a few weeks earlier. Did I tell you I got bumped up to a 6.5 for my appearance?
You did. Yes. Well done. Yeah.
I'm so really proud.
Good. Is there not something is that okay to talk about having an annual review?
Yeah.
On a podcast?
It's fine. I'm slapdash me. My career is hanging on a thread, so I've got nothing to lose.
So, just what you were saying there. I mean, I guess because that's the theme of this year's Adoption Week Scotland is talking about adoption.
Yes.
So that's kind of a nice way for us to end our questioning to you. Is there anything that you wanted to share with us in terms of what Scotland and the kind of, the messages that you're trying to gather? You've obviously mentioned very similar kind of scenarios to what we see down here about older children and siblings, but is there anything else that kind of sticks out as maybe being that little bit different in Scotland to England that you'd like people to hear about?
Yeah, I think it's probably really similar to England, to be honest. I think we need to try and recruit adopters who can take sibling groups, because there's a real need to keep children together. If it's right for them, there's a real need to keep them together, and the only way to do that and to have them adopted and to have them in the right home is to have people who can take to. And I think it can be a daunting idea at first, but I think something to consider is the amount you are going to be given to 2 children, and also older children as well. I think a lot of people have an idea, which is fine. It's an opinion that the younger the child, the better, and the easier they'll be to look after. I don't necessarily think that's true, and I think there's so much to be gained from adopting an older child. I think they can give so much. I think they have so much of a personality that's already formed. And I think, without sounding corny, I think it would be a challenge, but a real adventure to kind of...
Well, there's a phrase that we've heard this year down in England, which is harder to place doesn't necessarily mean harder to parent.
Yes.
And that I mean, for me, I had a sibling group and they were older. And it's not that it's been easy, of course it hasn't, but it's certainly something for people to consider. So yeah. I think on that note, Jess, thank you so much for joining us. You. Really appreciate it. I'm not going to let Al ask you any more questions.
No more questions.
But enjoy the rest of Adoption Week Scotland for 2017.
That's great. Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you, Jess.